We'll be looking at what Deuteronomy 24 is actually talking about. So this verse, okay, is a regulation about divorce and death. In the preceding verses, Moses described that a husband divorced his wife. She remarried, then through divorce or death, she was again unmarried, right? So throughout the Bible, the significance of marriage is heavily emphasized. The concept of returning to your first love is also a common theme. So I was having a hard time seeing why God would command that a man couldn't remarry his ex wife under the circumstances above, but remembering that this verse is centered around divorce. So it reminded me of the link between those two concepts. When a man gave his wife a divorce certificate, he is essentially asking, okay, to be released from his marriage vows in such a way that only death could previously accomplished. To death do us part. So we see where this is going. So in this way, God is demanding that the decision the man made, okay, this decision to break his covenant with his wife, God was demanding that this decision be even more serious, even more firm than the marriage itself. Okay, by declaring these stakes ahead of time, it was another layer of gravity in the seriousness of this whole messy business of divorce. So, divorce is simply never what God had intended for us in the first place. Now, you can look up at Matthew 19:7 to 11. Having said that, the severity of the situation of divorce, being what it is, serves an important purpose in life of every believer. Jesus repeatedly used marriage as a symbol of his relationship to us as the church, right? There were parables about his coming. Now, I believe it is also in Matthew. So, like a bridegroom, okay, um, these were comparison to marriage. Relationship between Christ and the church are like marriage couple, right? So this command from Moses now highlighting the grace and mercy involved. I repeat, the grace and mercy involved in marriage. The amazing amount of love and compassion displayed when God didn't simply allow us to come back to Him after we have been so spiritually adulterous. When you have pretty much, okay, cheated on God by sinning, He paved the way and sought each of us, like so much brutally in the atoning sacrifices reminds me of the severity of my sins. The strict regulation about divorce reminds us of the complete, full, total forgiveness at work in His mercy. So in chapter 14, begin with, okay, the status of the law, that Jesus, the Messiah from God, came in the flesh and reversed that law. The law was the bill of divorcement. In addition, it is written in this chapter that divorced man can remarry if she put away by her husband. Yet, Jesus came in the flesh and cancelled that law. Now you can go back in the book of Matthew, okay, verse 19 and 8, and look at this verses to reconfirm. So in this chapter of 24, of Deuteronomy 24, it is written, a husband cannot return to his ex-wife once she has been put away by him, and she remarries and becomes divorced again. The chapter transitions to penalizing with death of anyone who steals people. Okay, so Jesus would look at this as steals. You stealing something or sell it like merchandise. So this is captive slavery. Such a person is to be put to death in those days. Um, so, and also here, okay, there is chapter of Deuteronomy 24 or so. Then we have the topic of oppressing the poor and needy. So God gave some more rules and perimeters around preaching and oppressing and hire a servant who is poor and needy. So when you hire someone who is poor and needy, you have to be careful that you are fair to them as a boss, that you treat them fairly. Do not take advantage of, okay, them being poor and the fact that they have to work for you. You must be fair because if this poor servant, poor person, your poor worker ever cries out to God, okay, about the unjust that he or she may be facing under your authority of employment, God will surely hear, and it may turn into sin for the offender, for that person, the boss person, right? It is offense to unfairly treated your poor worker who you know well that they needed this job to feed the family, right? So meeting all their needs is required. Okay, when you sitting in the position of leadership or as a boss or as an employee, well, as a boss, when you employ someone, you need to, right, look and actually meet your worker needs. Without Jesus, a person is poor and needy, heading to hell and unable to change the situation on his own. God sent his son, Jesus, to give his life so that a person may have abundant, fulfilled life. In the same way, it is through a believer in which God works to meet the needs of others, whether financially or emotionally. Believers need to be, okay, believers, you, okay, need to be a blessing to the poor, not taking advantage of them as the world does. Do not take advantage of the poor person, but be generous and pay them what he or she is truly worth. Think about how you would want to be treated if you were in their shoes, okay? I understand that the world, okay, it's greed. It's greedy, driven by greed. And we see so many, okay, that take advantage of the poor. You must be separate and different from the world if you are a child of God and be like Jesus, okay? You must bless the poor. Even if you are a boss sitting in the higher position than they are, when you do hire someone who is in need, you must treat them fairly. Mm. So, also here we're seeing dying for your own sin. So, speaking of sin, the person who commits sin is the person who will die. This is the last chapter of Deuteronomy 24, okay? So, speaking of sin, the person who commits sin is the person who will die. Children aren't to be killed for their parents' sin. Perverting judgment is something people get caught up in, and God forbid it, especially against the fatherless and widow. Instead, do things to help the fatherless and widow. And God told Israel to be empathetic because Israel were bondmen in Egypt and did not like the treatment. So this